I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know about putting on great shows in GM mode, aka MyGM, week after week in WWE 2K22. This whole video is packed with information from start to finish for structuring the perfect show that earns you fans, builds rivalries, and generates profit. I'm going to do something strange in this video and actually start with the end, the final week of your GM mode season, which will be Wrestlemania pay-per-view. This is the easiest show card to cover and the easiest show for you to manage because there are almost no decisions to make. At Wrestlemania, you want to have all 5 fights on the card as level 4 rivalries, or as close to all 5 fights as possible. Building and managing these rivalries throughout, as well as your roster's stamina, is obviously where the challenge lies. You should be building these up from just before the penultimate pay-per-view, so if you have level 4 rivalries and you're 10 weeks out from Wrestlemania, definitely schedule and end those and get building new rivalries just in time for Wrestlemania. Put your title fights as the 1st and 5th fight and make them Hell in a Cell matches or TLC matches at a minimum. Wrestlemania aside, the rest of your GM mode season, from week 1 onwards, is a fun and challenging balancing act, and a very delicate one too. Essentially, what you're doing is spinning plates. You'll start with 12 to 14 fighters and will likely end up with 16 to 20 fighters, and you need to do a range of things with your show each week. You need to build and maintain popularity. You need to monitor and manage stamina and injuries. You need to build and maintain rivalries without letting them stagnate. You need to keep morale high, and you need to accept and deliver on some annoying promises, e.g. giving people title shots or letting them fight in front of their home crowd. There is a basic rule for putting on a good show. The first and final fights of the card should be your best fights of the night. The audience expects you to start and finish with a bang. If the middle fights are rated higher than the first or the final fights, or both, then your performance ratings will suffer and you won't gain as many fans as you could, or you may even lose more fans than you should. Ensuring that your middle fight doesn't outperform your other fights is more simple when you know what determines how highly a fight will be rated. I believe there are 6 things that determine how successful a fight will be. Number 1, the class of the wrestlers, e.g. making sure you've got a fighter against a bruiser, or a cruiser against a giant, or 2 opposing classes if it's a tag team match. 2, the role of the wrestlers, e.g. making sure you've got a babyface against a heel, or a green against a red, or 2 of these if it's a tag team match. 3, the match type. A Hell in a Cell is likely to be rated much more highly than a regular match, but the more exciting a match type is, the more expensive it is in both finances and in stamina, and picking a good match type isn't a guarantee of a good fight by any means. 4, whether it's a title fight. Title fights are likely to be more of a success, but these also use up more stamina as well. 5, the star rating of the wrestlers involved. And 6, perhaps most importantly, the popularity of the fighters. Popularity is a huge factor in how well a fight will go down, along with having contrasting classes and roles. And obviously throw rivalries on top of all those things as well. If your 2 most popular fighters can fight each other, have contrasting styles and synergies within their classes, and it can be a title fight with an active rivalry, you're almost guaranteed a super high rated fight. Throw all of these into a TLC or a Hell in a Cell and it's a 5-star fight for sure. On the flip side, a fight between 2 40-something popularity fighters likely won't be anything better than 3 stars at the absolute highest, even if they tick all the other boxes that we've just discussed. So, with whoever you're deciding to fight in a given week, balance the management of stamina with building up rivalries and popularity, ensuring the fight that's most likely to be the most popular of the night is scheduled last. If you're not quite sure which fight will be more popular, you can make one a normal match type and another one a tables or extreme rules, TLC or Hell in a Cell, and this one will then be more likely to be more popular, though it's never fully guaranteed. Also note, fighters must appear in a card if you're looking to build their popularity, but they must not appear in a card if you're looking to regain as much stamina as possible. Remember, we're plate spinning here, and this is a battle of who can spin them the best. Also note that you shouldn't intentionally put a terrible fight on as your second fight. If you could have all 3 fights as 5-star fights, then this would still work extremely well, but usually there's going to be one fight that isn't as good as the others, so you should always look to schedule this as the middle one. Now you know about how to order your show cards, you need to know about variety. You don't want repetitive cards. This includes the types of matches and also the attributes of the wrestlers involved. I've received a number of comments on my other videos asking if you can have all male rosters. The answer is no, and you wouldn't want them even if you could, as they won't perform well enough. Instead, in a 3-fight show, you should ideally want to have a male fight, a female fight, and a tag team fight from either gender. In a 4-fight show, you can throw in another fight of your own choosing. Also, try to have varied fights in terms of classes. You don't want every single fight to be a fighter versus a bruiser. Now, you won't always be able to provide a good amount of variety. Occasionally, you might need an all-male or an all-female card, or you might need to put 2 normal fights on and a tables match, or have no tag team matches for a one-off week, but do know that it's ideal to have a mixed card. Now you know how to order and vary your fights, we need to talk about the flow of your shows. And when I say the flow of your shows, I don't mean one specific show, I mean all of your shows, starting from week 1 and going all the way through the season, ensuring that all of your shows are good, rather than repeatedly having one great one and then one poor one. This is where the plate spinning really starts to come in. I recommend tracking which fights you've put on. I use pen and paper, but maybe a spreadsheet or something would work better for you. The first weeks of the season are easy if your draft has gone well. I have a separate video on drafting well that I'll link in the description if you want to check that out after this video finishes. In the first weeks, you'll pit your obvious rivals against one another. You'll stick with normal fight types, tables, and run-ins to save on cash. You'll start to make losses if you go for lots of expensive fight types in the early weeks. But do be aware that with run-ins, the rivalry starts or develops from the person running in on their rival, rather than the 2 wrestlers involved in a fight. To be clear, if John Cena was fighting Finn Balor and The Undertaker ran in on John Cena, it would be John Cena and The Undertaker whose rivalry starts to grow, and Finn is irrelevant from a rivalry standpoint in this example. The difficult task really begins once your popular fighters start getting tired and once rivalries begin dying out and you need to start developing new ones. Here's a simple trick for you if you already have a future rivalry planned out for wrestlers that are involved in a current level 4 rivalry. At pay-per-view, put your level 4 rivalry on as your first fight, or at least one of the early fights. Then, in one of the promos after the level 4 rivalry fights at pay-per-view, because this will end the rivalry, try to start a new rivalry by calling out a wrestler from the rivalry that just ended. That's right, in the same pay-per-view, you can end a rivalry and start a new one with the same wrestler involved. And here's another trick for you as well. Sign 1 or 2 really cheap free agents. Make sure they're a good matchup against one another, e.g. a fighter and a bruiser with a red and green role. This is perfect for giving you the chance to rest wrestlers and regain some of their stamina. But what you're going to do here is you're going to use them on opposing teams in a tag team match with 2 more popular fighters on their team. Depending on how popular their teammates are, this fight can be in the middle of a random show card, slotting in as a predicted 2.5 to 3 star normal match. Not only does this help you pad your card out for cheap, but you can and will build up nobodies into superstars if you manage them accordingly. I've had a low rated free agent reach 90 popularity without even holding onto the belt, and that's still in the first half of the season. Just do not fight the 2 unpopular wrestlers in a 1v1 until their popularity has grown significantly. When it comes to promos, I like to have 1 self promo and 1 call out per card, generally speaking. When you're calling out, if it's for wrestlers that don't feature anywhere else on the card, always be sure to call out with the higher stamina fighter, allowing the lower stamina fighter some extra rest. Every few weeks I will throw in a charity appearance, and I'll usually have a charity appearance at pay-per-view too, as income and profit from these tends to be high anyway. I rarely do advertising. Yes, it could earn you $10,000 to $20,000, but sacrificing the popularity of wrestlers is not something I recommend doing. This doesn't mean that I don't do advertising promos, I just really use them sporadically, or if I'm really low on cash, which tends to be earlier on in seasons. I'll also only do a role change when I absolutely need to, as it's a very inefficient use of a promo, as you don't gain anything and you're using up the promo slot too. Finally, we're going to look at logistics. The arena and the other things you need to book logistically play a massive part in how good of a show you put on. You need to look at the bonuses you can hit and see if any of these are good choices for you to try and hit in any given week. For example, if you're already sort of past the second pay-per-view, let's say, and you're putting on a card that can't get any bonuses at all, well, you've probably already made a mistake or two to get to this point, but it's also too late at this point too. So what you might be better doing here is spending big on logistics to pull up the show ratings. But interestingly, if you can only get some of the lower bonuses, as opposed to no bonuses at all, you might be better to use cheaper logistics and claim the bonuses for hitting them, rather than spending big. As always in GM mode, this really does depend on how your roster is looking at a specific time. There is no set rule to follow here, but generally speaking, the more you spend on logistics, the more fans you will bring in or retain. My one exception is the arena. I will always look to fight in the biggest possible arena because revenue and profits are so important to the gameplay, and this is pretty much where you'll generate most of your profits from. However, at some stage, you might get to the point where earning profit isn't so crucial. This does happen if you're playing a 50-week season. If this is the case, you might be better to sacrifice some profit to hit the most amount of show bonuses possible, or to earn the most amount of fans possible. Remember, it's the number of fans you have that determines who wins and loses in GM mode. It doesn't matter if one player finishes the season with $2 million in the bank and the other one finishes broke, if the broke player has more fans by the end of it. Running this like a business is important at stages, but long term, you're not running a business here. Your goal is to generate fans. The way I play is to focus on money early on without sacrificing fans pointlessly, e.g. I won't just spam advertisement promos to pick up the cash. I just won't throw cash away on TLC and Hell in a Cell matches when I'm fighting in a school gym that doesn't fit many fans in and therefore doesn't generate much revenue. And then I move into a fan-focused approach as quickly as I can sustain myself. It's worth looking at the logistic goals to see if they're worth hitting. Could you benefit from getting a small boost to popularity on some of your fighters? Or don't you need it? If you don't need it, pay for the bigger and better logistics. If you do need it, sacrifice a little bit of the show performance this week in order to make your roster more effective in future weeks. Finally, you should always be checking your commissioner goal within your journal, but you should also always be working out if the prize for achieving it is worthwhile. If you're going to get an injury card and you already have 3 of them, well, you probably don't need the prize, especially if you have other plans for that evening and the commissioner goal is kind of going to ruin those plans. If it's a valuable prize, such as the ability to veto an opponent's champion or superstar, you might want to put more of a focus on achieving it, even if it wasn't exactly what you'd originally intended for a show. If you're interested in seeing more videos, hit the subscribe button. I'll see you again in a future video. Thanks for watching.